Okay, so start off here with the parsing. We know that we're in the Niphal. So I'll just kind of point out those signs, diagnostics, clues, whatever you want to call them, that indicate the Niphal stem, as well as those that indicate the conjugation. So first one is actually our paradigmatic form, Nichtal. This has no suffix. So this is either going to be a perfect 3ms, which has no suffix, or this is going to be an imperfect 1C or 1CP. This is sort of the dilemma that the Niphal creates. Is we've already got a form that has a nuneheric prefix, so which is the imperfect 1CP, or the cohortative 1CP, which will also have a comet's hay at the end. So how do we determine whether this is Niphal or imperfect, cal imperfect? Well, the primary way that we do that is with the theme vowel. So in a normal strong cal, 1CS imperfect, you're going to have an O class theme vowel here. Now that's not always reliable. There are a lot of reasons why the cal imperfect may shift its theme vowel to patach, which is the second most common theme vowel for the cal imperfect. So you have to be careful. But here, katal is one of those verbs that's going to have a holum theme vowel. So the fact that it has a patach tells us that this is not in the cal stem. Therefore, this is in the Niphal stem, and since it's in the Niphal stem, we know that it's not imperfect, because in the Niphal stem, this noon actually assimilates into R1, in the imperfect, that is. So this is going to have to be the Niphal perfect 3ms form of katal. Now when we look at number 2 here, we've got another sort of irregularity. We still don't have that holum, so we're not looking at a cal imperfect 1CP, but now we've got the kamet's theme vowel. Well, this kamet's theme vowel is going to indicate the participle. Now it's a little tricky because most of our stems or patterns have the mem prefix for the participle, but the cal active, cal passive, and Niphal participles do not have that mem prefix. And so here the difference between the cal perfect 3ms, between the Niphal perfect 3ms and the Niphal participle, masculine singular, is going to be that patach versus that kametz. All right, so next one here we've got nilchamtem. Nilchamtem. This is from lacham. Lacham, I'm foggy on, but I think this means like fight. Let's take a look at the vocabulary here. I think it's from like milchama, or milchama comes from lacham. Let me double check this. Lechem is okay. Lacham, yeah, fight. Now this, it says in the Niphal it means fight. In English, fight is an active voice. It's not was fought. And so here that tells us that lacham probably does not occur in the cal stem, or the cal pattern rather. So even though it looks Niphal, which it is, this particular verb will not translate passively when it's in the Niphal stem. It'll just translate actively. Okay, so that's another thing that can be a little bit tricky, but you just got to keep in mind. So here we've got the root lacham. We've got a nuneheric prefix on the front, but we also have a tem suffix, and tem is certainly going to be a perfect suffix. So this is Niphal perfect 2MP from lacham. Next one, we've got yikatev. Yikatev here, we see the yod-heric prefix. That's a good indication that we're looking at an imperfect form. And the heric prefix often indicates cal. The problem is we get to R1 and we've got a dagesh and we've got a Confernece here. Now, when you see a Dagesh and a Confernece toward the beginning, in the first couple, well, actually, it's going to be, most likely, it's going to be the second letter. When you see this Dagesh and Confernece in the second letter, it's often going to be a Niphal imperfect. So, the sign of the Niphal here is going to be the fact that the noon prefix assimilates into this R1 Kaf. But we've still got the Patach here, or I'm sorry, the Confernece here, which is a definite sign. And then I think that's pretty much it here. The Niphal will, in the imperfect, it'll shift from an E-class theme vowel to, I believe, an A-class theme vowel in the second and first person. I have to check that chart again. So, imperfect. Oh no, it does maintain that E-class all the way through. This is what I'm thinking of, are these long endings, the na endings. That's where it shifts back to a Patach here. So these are going to be accented on this Patach syllable, so it's tikatalna. Tikatalna is going to be this form. So, yeah, going to have a serif theme vowel unless it reduces, or unless you've got this consonantal suffix where it's going to shift to the Patach. All right. So number 4, Niphal, imperfect. Yod indicates 3M. Lack of suffix indicates singular. Number 5, we've got nishamer. All right, so again, we've got a noon hirik at the beginning. That could be cal imperfect 1CP. But we've got this Dagesh Confernece in R1, and that's a sign that we're actually looking at a Niphal imperfect. Now, this is a Niphal imperfect 1CP because, again, the noon hirik here is the noon hirik of the imperfect 1CP. The noon hirik of the Niphal pattern has assimilated into the shin. So this, again, Niphal imperfect 1CP. Number 6, here we've got the hey hirik. And you'll remember, when we get into the imperfect side of the verbs, that imperfect family, those imperfect conjugations that lose their prefix, the hey is going to come stand in for that prefix so that we don't lose this Niphal out of here. It wants to keep that Niphal assimilated, so this hey comes in to hold the Niphal inside of the R1 letter. So this is going to be either infinitive construct or imperative, and the shurik here tells us the difference. This is going to be a Niphal imperative 2MP form of shamar. All right, next one we've got is Tikachtli. Tikachtli here, we've got the tav hirik prefix that indicates an imperfect conjugation, but then we've got the Dagesh Confernece in R1 that indicates Niphal imperfect. The tav prefix with the hirik yod suffix indicates second feminine singular, and so we've got a Niphal imperfect 2FS. From Katal. Number 8, immediately when I see the noon hirik prefix and the segel tav ending, I'm thinking Niphal participle. All right, this is the feminine singular ending for a participle. So Niphal participle, feminine singular. The only other time you're going to get that might be with a third hey. No, I'm not thinking third hey. I'm thinking one yod vav, where you can get that segel tav, or segel tav in the infinitive, but you wouldn't have the prefix, so that's not going to throw you off. All right, number 9, Nishmaru. Okay, this is a pretty straightforward one. We've got a noon-heric prefix, but we've got this shuric suffix. Shuric is never going to occur as a suffix of a 1CP imperfect. If you've got a 1CP imperfect, cal, then this noon-heric, well, cal or otherwise, the only suffix you're going to see with the noon-heric is maybe the comet's hay suffix of the cohortative form. So this tells me right here that this shuric is a perfect suffix. Perfect suffix shuric indicates 3CP. So this is a Niphal prefix, Niphal perfect 3CP of shamar. Number 10, hikatol. Hikatol here. We've got, again, that situation where we've got a hey standing in for the lost imperfect prefix so that the Niphal noon doesn't come back out. So this Niphal noon prefix that is assimilated into the Kof, the Dagish, and the Kamets, this is a sign of a Niphal in the imperfect family. Of course, it's one of those imperfect conjugations that loses its prefix. So it's either infinitive construct or imperative. It could be infinitive absolute, but I believe the infinitive absolute has a, I want to say it has a sere here. Let's double check. Infinitive absolute. Nope, it will look, oh, okay. I've got them backwards. See, I do this with the, this block, the infinitive construct, the imperative, and the infinitive absolute. I get these mixed up. Usually the imperative and the infinitive absolute are the identical form. Here, which is what I would have expected the imperative to have the sere, but here, I'm just going to check another grammar real quick because that's so unexpected that I want to make sure that's right. So let me grab here we go. Grab another grammar here and pull this up. We are looking at the Niphal infinitive construct. Yep. Okay, sure enough. My other grammar agrees. So, sometimes this infinitive absolute, this other grammar is saying sometimes this holum will have the holum vav instead, but it seems like that's a rarer occurrence. So yeah, this is one of those situations where the imperative and the infinitive absolute are usually, or the imperative 2ms, I should say, and the infinitive absolute are usually identical forms, but for some strange reason in the Niphal, the imperative and the infinitive construct are the identical forms. So, in that sense, we have the infinitive absolute down here. We've got hikatol is the infinitive absolute of katal. All right. Double check, make sure I didn't miss anything there. Yep. So the difference between these two is that sometimes this infinitive absolute, this placeholder hey will drop off so that the noon can come back out. The problem now is, do you have an infinitive absolute of katal, a Niphal infinitive absolute, or do you simply have a cal imperfect 1CP form? Well, the way you're going to tell is the infinitive absolute is never going to be on its own. It's going to be with some other verb form. And so if you've got, Nick Toll out there by itself in the sentence, it's almost certainly going to be the cal imperfect, the cal imperfect 1CP form. All right. So that's A. We'll look at C and E. All right, so more parsing here. This is specifically for cal and Niphal, one guttural and one noon. So this is just review. But we'll go through here. Ahmad Tem, pretty straightforward. It is a one guttural. So you do have, instead of a Shavah here, you've got a Hatef Patach. But other than that, it's pretty obviously a cal perfect 2MP. Number 2 here, we've got A'amod. This is going to be unusual. Sorry, Ya'amod. This is going to be unusual because you've got this strange situation where you are used to Yod Patach, or just a Patach prefix vowel indicating Niphal. The problem is, and this is why they review these together, the one guttural in the cal and the one guttural in the Niphal, or the one, I should say, the one guttural in the cal, the prefix looks very similar to a Niphal. So what's going on here is this is actually a cal imperfect, but when you've got this one guttural, the guttural prefers an A-class vowel, so instead of a Shavah, it's going to take a Hatef Patach. Well, when you have a Hatef Patach here, you're going to mirror the complementary short vowel in your prefix. Okay, well, that makes it look a lot like a Niphal, but the reason why you know it's not a Niphal is because it doesn't have the Hirik Yod or even the Seraphim vowel. It still has the Holam, which is a sign of the cal in the imperfect. So this is going to be a cal imperfect 3ms form of Ahmad. Number 3 here, you see the difference. The only difference is the Holam has shifted to a Hirik Yod. That confirms that this is actually a Niphal imperfect. Niphal imperfect 3ms form of Ahmad. Number 4, He Emid. Well, this is essentially the same as number 3, except we've lost the Yod prefix and a He comes and stands in. Okay? Well, not exactly. If that were the case, we would still have the Patach here. All right? And we'd probably have a Hatef Patach here. With this shift to the Segel, that is indicating that we're now in the perfect. So this is just like a He Hirik prefix in the perfect, except the He Hirik doesn't like to go with a one guttural. So just remember, when you get the Segel prefix, when you get the He Segel prefix, you're looking at a perfect. So this is going to be a Niphal perfect 3ms of Ahmad. Here we go in number 5, we see that He Patach prefix. So if this were going to be a Niphal, a Niphal, let's say, infinitive construct, then in that case we would expect He Patach, Ayin Hatef Patach, just like we have He Patach, Ayin Hatef Patach. So this is on the imperfect side of the family. We've lost a prefix, so it's either infinitive or imperative. The Shurik, again, is going to be the indicator that this is in the imperative. This is a Niphal imperative 2MP form of Ahmad. And then number 6 here, we've pretty obviously got a participle. We've got the mem prefix, we've got the Hirik Yod mem suffix. Now we have to figure out, and that Hirik Yod mem suffix tells us this is masculine plural. Now we just have to figure out the pattern. Well, mem patach is indicative of a Niphal pattern. You might say, well, maybe it's just a patach because you've got the hatef patach over here. How do we know it's not cal? Well, cal participles don't have a mem prefix. So this is going to be a Niphal participle masculine plural from Ahmad. Number 7, we have Yippol. So here we've got a cal prefix. Yod Hirik is a cal prefix for the imperfect. The noon, one noon of Niphal has assimilated into R2, the pei, and we've got this Holam theme vowel, which also indicates cal. So we have a cal imperfect 3ms form of Niphal. Number 8, we have the same thing, but we've added a Shurik. Yippaloo. Excuse me. So here, basically we've just turned this into a plural. So this is a, I'm trying to catch the trick here because I assume they're going to throw a Niphal back in here somewhere, but none of these are Niphal. As far as I can tell, because I don't think the Niphal affects the theme or the prefix val here. I think these would still be pataks even in a 1 noon if this were Niphal. And let's just check the chart for that. Yes. So it retains the patak there. All right. So yeah, all of these are going to be cal imperfect. We've got 3ms, 3mp, and then here we've got either 3fs or 2ms. Again, all of these are for Niphal. And just to make sure I didn't miss anything, we will go ahead and check the answer key here. Yep, cal, imperfect, so we got that. All right. Now we're looking at, that was C, we're going to look at E. And let's just take, I guess, number 2 here. Looks like the longest one. And just to keep us honest, I'll put this over the answer there, so get rid of my schedule. All right, so Vayehi, again, this is this doesn't usually need to be translated. You can go ahead and translate it preliminarily just to sort of figure out what to do with the rest of this, but it doesn't need to appear in your final translation. It's just setting the timing. So when we've got Yehi here, this is the jussive form of Haya. The jussive plus the vav relative is going to indicate that we are talking about past time. Vayehi. If it was Vehaya, then we would be talking about future time. So this is setting whatever we're about to read in the past. And usually it's going to be followed by an infinitive construct. Well, what do you know? That's what we have here. We have lakach. We've got hilakach. Remember, this lakach here is functioning, its morphology is a little bit similar to a 1 noon. And so the, well, actually it's not, because it's not assimilating. Lakach is conjugating just like a strong verb at this point. Part of the reason for that is because it's in the Niphal, as indicated by the dagesh and kametz in R1, because the noon has to assimilate into R1, and so you're not going to have the noon and the lamed assimilate. So that's why this looks like a strong verb. But this is lakach, and it is Niphal, as indicated by the dagesh and the kametz in R1. And the hey hirik at the front, this indicates that it's in the imperfect family, but we've lost our prefix. So this is either going to be infinitive or imperative. Well, it has a holum vav suffix, so that tells us that this is most likely going to be infinitive construct with a 3ms suffix, plus it has a preposition attached to the front. That's not going to happen with the imperative. So this, usually when you've got a kaf preposition attached to an infinitive construct, kaf is indicating some sort of contemporaneous time element. So we usually translate this as when or while. So you could say, and it happened when took him. So is this when he took, or is this when something took him? Followed by took or captured, we have the directional preposition, L, so to the city. Usually that's going to follow a direct object. And so I'm going to assume for now that the holum vav suffix is indicating the object of the infinitive. So it happened when he took, or when took him to the city, because we can't say when he captured to the city. We have to have a direct object here. The problem is we don't have a suffix, or I'm sorry, we don't have a subject. Now we don't need a subject for a finite verb, but an infinitive, I guess our subject is implied by the main verb. So since the main verb is 3MP, I'm going to translate our subject here as masculine plural they. So, and it happened when they took him to the city, Kavats. I think this is collect, is that right? Let's look up Kavats here. I don't want to give away my... Here we go. Kavats, gather. Okay, yeah, collect, gather, same thing. Let me pull this back up. And then we will go back to... Oh well. I'm trying to be sneaky here and it's not working. Alright. So when they took him to the city, they gathered the elders and the men, the ha'anashim, and the women, hanashim. And the sons of them, Ham is, and their sons, and their daughters. So they gathered everybody together. When they took him to the city, they gathered the elders and the men and the women and their sons and their daughters to him, or could even be against him, and said lahem, to him, Yehi. Now again, we talked about how Yehi is the jussive form of Haya. Haya means he was. Jussive is expressing volition. And so Yehi would be something like, may he be. May who be. May Adonai be. May the Lord be imechem, with you all. Okay? I don't really get why that's an appropriate expression when someone seems to have been captured, taken to a city, and everybody's gathered. May the Lord be with you all. Because I would expect if it's like, may the Lord be with you. I thought they were talking to this guy, the guy that they captured. But this is plural, so they're talking to everyone who's gathered. Let's see what Futato says. Okay, I really don't like... Oh, you know what? You're right. This is Niphal, and I'm translating it active. That's what gave me such a hard time here. Okay. Yeah, so the 3MS is the subject here. That's why I was so confused when there was no subject. But yeah, this isn't took. This isn't took him. This was when him was taken. So when he was taken to the city, they gathered... Oh, and this is also Niphal, so this is going to be reflexive. So they were gathered together, the elders, the men, the women, their sons and their daughters to him. Then he said to them, may the Lord be with you all. All right, so see, I got so focused in on my conjugations that I forgot to employ or incorporate the patterns into the translation there. Let's do one more translation. Nothing else, maybe I can redeem myself. Let's do number 4 here. All right. This is a tricky one. So here, horderu, this is a verb, believe it or not. Couple things to sort of convince you that it's a verb is basically the shuric. Shuric is an unusual suffix to have on a noun. So that confirms that it's a verb, and as I think about it, I've got the hey holum at the beginning, so that's telling me this might be a hiphil of a one-yod vav. All right, so what one-yod vavs do I know? Well, if that's the case, then this is my yod. I've got a resh here. So what verb do I know that would lose? It's, basically it's going to be yara. Now I forgot again. I think from last week we learned yara was praise, or shoot, or like throw. So let's look that up again. Let's see which one we're dealing with here. Yod, resh, hey. Throw, shoot, or teach. I have a terrible time with this verb because what was the other one that was throw or shoot? Yeah, yada. And they're so similar, like the resh and the dalet are so similar. I have a terrible time with these. So one means throw or well, they both mean throw or shoot in the cow. Now I can connect teach with throw or shoot because I just see someone kind of like um, throwing out lessons or illustrations or something like that, like where you teach someone how to shoot a basketball. Like I can connect those, but then when I have to connect it to praise or confess, that gets tricky. So I got to find some way to connect teach with the resh, because the resh is what makes this teach in the hifil. So a teacher, I'm going to say, a teacher, and then yada, I got to somehow connect the dalet with praise or confess. And what am I going to do for that? Yada. I guess I could try to fit like Yadonai, like Adonai in there. So praise or confess Adonai. Do what you got to do to make it click, because I've been studying Hebrew for, I mean, I'm 7 or 8 years now, and I still get these confused because I don't have a good mnemonic. So good mnemonics are incredibly helpful if you can get them, if you can find them, if you can come up with them. All right, so let's go back here to putting it all together. Oh, that didn't work. Okay. So Yahra is teacher. So this is Hifil, obviously. We've got a Shurik, so that indicates plural. This is going to be masculine plural. This is going to be they. Okay, do we have a perfect? Or do we have an infinitive? What are my indicators either way? If this were infinitive, how would it look different? I think these might be identical forms. Let's go check. I'm going to say perfect and start translating it that way, and then we'll go check and see if the perfect 3MS or 3MP and the well, no, it's not infinitive. It would have to be imperative. With those two, with the infinitive, or sorry, with the imperative 2MS, 2MP, and the perfect 3CP be identical. I know there were identical forms we pointed out last week in the conference, but I got to go back and check those. So what I'm going to do is a little Hebrew hack called context, and we're going to try to translate this in context and see if we can figure it out when our memory of our paradigms is a little bit foggy. So my gut tells me this is perfect. I'm going to translate it that way, see how it sounds, and then play with it if I need to. So if this is Niphal perfect 3CP, this would be they taught your sons. Okay, already I'm starting to think this sounds more like an imperative because this is second person. So this is probably the imperative. Now, I still have to check and see if the Niphal perfect 3CP and the Niphal imperative 2MP are identical. I think they are. But now with this having a second person suffix, your sons, that makes me think this is teach your sons. Teach them what? Mitzvot. No, mitzvot. No, mitzvot. That's tricky because you think, well, the Holam Vav is the vowel of the Tzade. No, the silent Shavah is the vowel of the Tzade. The Tzade doesn't have a vowel, which means that the Vav here is a consonant and Holam is the vowel. So this is tricky, but mitzvot here is the correct pronunciation. So teach your sons the mitzvot, the commandments of the Lord, and Zakar, remember. So tizakarna, this is going to be Niphal imperfect, either 3FP or 2FP. Either way, it's feminine, which is surprising. Oh, maybe yes, because mitzvot is the subject. Remember, this is Niphal, so it's, and they will be remembered. So the mitzvot will be remembered. That's assuming, yeah, we definitely have a Vav conjunction here rather than a Vav relative. Because we know this is an imperfect form, or possibly jussive. So if this were the Vav relative, it would have the Patach Dagesh going on. So we've got they will be remembered. And here again, we've got this Yahra. So, this has to be a 3MP form. And they will teach their sons. So again, I'm going with imperative 2MP here. Teach your sons the commandments of the Lord, and they will be remembered. That's talking about the commandments, not the sons will be remembered, the commandments, because the sons is masculine, mitzvot is feminine, and this here is a feminine, either 3FP or 2FP. If it's mitzvot, it's 3FP. Unless it's possible that this is an imperative. No, because this is masculine. So you, sirs, teach your sons. The only thing feminine so far is mitzvot. So, and the commandments will be remembered. And they will teach. Who will teach? Presumably your sons will teach their sons. And the sons of their sons, Lada'a, this is infinitive construct form of yada, to know, and the sons of your sons, okay, and they will teach their sons, and they will teach the sons of their sons, so they will teach their sons and their grandsons to know whom or what? To know Adonai, and to know, double direct object here, and to know mitzvotav, his commandments. So that's wordy sentence, but basically smoothing out the translation here. We've got teach your sons the commandments of the Lord, and they will be remembered. Those commandments will be remembered. And they, your sons, will teach their sons and their sons' sons to know the Lord and his commandments. All right, let's see what Futato has here. Teach your sons the commandments of the Lord so that. Okay, so he's interpreting this vav here as, and that's good because if this is just like consecutive, this is more the case in narrative than this would be like exhortation, I guess. But this string of verbs you often expect to be with vav relatives. Well, we don't use a vav relative here. If we want to say, teach your sons the commandments of the Lord, and as a result, the commandments of the Lord will be remembered, then why not just do a vav relative with a perfect? The fact that he does a vav conjunction with an imperfect indicates the relationship between these verbs needs to be explored. And he's exploring that relationship as the second verb is the result of the first verb. And so he translates that so that they may be remembered. So this is indicating result of the first verb. Teach with the result that the commandments may be remembered. And with the result that your sons may teach their sons and their grandsons to know the Lord and his commandments. Right, so other than that, we're pretty close here. Now I want to go back and check horu and figure out, could this be either what we decided here, imperative, Niphal imperative 2MP, or could this be Niphal perfect 3CP? Let's go back here to the Niphal. Niphal 1 yod vav. Alright, so Niphal 1 yod vav in the perfect. Hoshivu. Okay, so but we have a third hey. We have a double week. That's the issue. Did we see a double week example? Third hey. Does he give us a third hay and a 1 yod? See, Nakah is a third hay and a 1 noon, so it's doubly weak. But we don't see a third hay and a 1 yod. So I think they would be the same. Let's try a search. Let's try a morphological search for... let me pull up my my Hebrew keyboard here. We're gonna look for Yara. Huh. I mean, I guess I better pick this one. We're gonna look for that. English back here. We're gonna look for that as a verb, as a Niphal verb. We're gonna look for the perfect 3M. Well, it could be either, right? Let's just delete the gender. So we're going to do perfect third person plural. Let's see if there are any occurrences of this in the Hebrew. Of course not. So it would be a hypothetical form then. Let's see if we can find it as a verb, Niphal imperative to MP. Huh. Do I have everything right here? Yara? Maybe I should. Ah! Thank you. Thank you. Let's go back here. Okay, Niphal imperative. There we go. 3, oh, 2, oh goodness. 2MP. We get one result. All right, so the weird thing here is we've got this I think this is a paragogic noon, and we've got this like connecting vowel shurik. So either way, it would be hypothetical forms, but I do think, let's go back to our example. I do think that this could be either Niphal perfect 3CP or Niphal imperative 2MP, but it's certainly here in context imperative. All right. Any questions about chapter 36 before we jump to 37? All right, so here we're looking at Niphal with one guttural, one noon, one yod, third hay. So all of the weak roots, apparently. So we'll just go through here in A, and then section D is translation. So we'll go through here and just point out what we see. All right, so I want to make sure. Let's see if he talks about. Not a ton of. All right. Well, let's work through it. Okay, so a couple things. Well, yeah, let's just review. So again, what problems would a one guttural present for the Niphal? Well, it's not going to present a huge problem in the perfect because the perfect doesn't already have a prefix, so you just shove, the Niphal prefix on there. The issue is, just like the Niphal, these one gutturals don't like a heric before them. And so they're going to shift here, and this is sort of we saw this with the Niphals as well. They choose to go with the segel rather than like a patak or something like that. So here the guttural, the one guttural, prefers a hatef segel, and so the Niphal prefix vowel is going to give the corresponding short vowel. All right, that's not too crazy. That should be relatively easy to recognize. Shouldn't throw you off too much. When we look at the imperfect, you got to realize there's something that happens here that's similar to what happens to the PL. So the PL wants a dogish in R2. Well, when you have a two guttural, that's a problem because the guttural can't take a dogish. Well, in the Niphal, the noon prefix wants to assimilate in R1, which would give us a dogish, but the one guttural now can't take the dogish. So where we would have a yod heric in the prefix and then a dogish kametz in R1, that yod heric now lengthens to a yod sere. All right? And you're going to notice this sere kametz pattern at the beginning of a verb. That's going to happen a lot. And that you're going to be able to pick up on that as an indication because it also happens in the imperative. It also happens in the infinitive construct. So it happens in the vav relative. You're going to be able to pick up on that eventually as an indication of a Niphal in the imperfect family. Okay, not specifically not just limited to the imperfect conjugation, but the imperfect family of conjugations, that is, the conjugations built on the imperfect, which is obviously the imperfect, the infinitive, the imperative, those cohortative, jussive, those sorts of things. So that's what you should be aware of with the one gutturals. That's the issue that you run into. That's why we have a change, because the one guttural can't take that doggish that we normally see in R1. What about one noon? Well, the tricky thing with the one noon is you've got two noons. So let's look at the perfect. You've got a noon that's already assimilated. This is your R1 noon. Now the Niphal prefix comes on the front. You didn't used to have to worry about the one noons in the perfect because there was nothing forcing them to assimilate. But now that one noon is closing a syllable, and so that's when the noon decides to assimilate. So previously, when we were looking at one noons, the perfect wasn't an issue because there wasn't a prefix. But just as we saw with the Niphal in the Niphal, we do have a prefix. And so as a result, we're going to get this situation where it kind of looks a little bit like a PL. You see how if this were a PL perfect, it would look really similar. The difference would be we'd have a serre here. So the thing that's going to get confusing for the one noons and the Niphal is there's going to be times when they look like a PL, and you're going to have to think carefully about whether this is a Niphal or a PL. All right, when we get to the imperfect, it's basically the same. You're not going to run into trouble with that. I wish he had a full paradigm of the, but let's just look at the Niphal paradigm and plug a one noon in there. All right, so here, basically, if this were a one noon, we would have the noon of the, okay, this is what we want to look at, is this right here. I'm going to try to illustrate this. I don't think I can actually ink this up, can I? Is that just a highlighter? Yep, I think that's just my highlighter. That's not going to help. Okay, so just, I guess, follow the mouse here, but let's assume this is a one noon. So instead of katal, we have natal or something like that. The one noon assimilates when it closes. We don't have the same thing here. The one noon is going to assimilate when it closes a syllable. That only, like up here, if this were a one noon, we would have a silent shava underneath of it. It would be closing this syllable, therefore it would assimilate. But when you get here, you see that R1 is no longer closing a syllable. So this noon doesn't need to assimilate in the imperfect. So if you were to see, let's say, natsal here, let me just type that out over here. Go bigger. Go SBL Hebrew. Let me get my Hebrew keyboard out, and we'll go. I gotta find not Saul, okay? So what's going to happen here is we're going to add our Niphal prefix, ni, not Saul. And then we're going to add our imperfect prefix, which is going to be ye, ne, not Saul. Okay? And so what happens here is we get the hirik and the shava, which means that this noon is now closing a syllable. So it needs to assimilate. So it's going to assimilate by going yeah. Still got our, and then it's going to assimilate into the next letter, which is a noon. But we've still got our patach here, or sorry, our kamets here. And so now we've got, oops, where am I at? Sale, probably. Yeah. So the reason why he doesn't spend any time over here, 37, on the one noons in the imperfect is because the noon doesn't assimilate. It looks just like all the others. All right, so you don't need to worry too much about the one noon throwing you off in the imperfect. Same thing for all of the imperfect related ones. When you get to the participle, again, the same type of thing happens. The one noon is going to assimilate into R2. And so the difference between a noon perfect in the Niphal and a noon participle is that difference between the patach and the kamets. That's what you have to keep in mind. All right, and then the one yods, again, like we saw with the Niphal, these one yod vavs, the yod's just going to shift to a vav, and it's going to become part of the prefix vowel. All right, so whether that is, well, it doesn't do that here. It just becomes a vav. Trying to think through why this change occurs only in the perfect and not the imperfect. What's going on with the morphology here? It must have to do with this kamets vowel in R1 that keeps the vav as a letter rather than a vowel. All right, so there's no vowel added in the perfect. You're just adding the Niphal, the noon prefix, and since this is essentially in the perfect. It's essentially what we saw with the Niphal. But when you come over here to the imperfect, you remember the sign of the Niphal in the imperfect is not just the noon hirik, which assimilates. It's also the kamets here, and that's what keeps this vav as a letter rather than a vowel. So this is not a shurik. This is a vav letter with a dagesh and a kamets. All right, so that it's going to look funny. You're not used to seeing a vav dagesh as a letter, but that's what it is. Other than that, it shouldn't throw you off too bad. So the one you got to watch out for is the perfect. And everything else looks like it should. Okay, so this perfect, that's the one that gets a little bit tricky. All right, and then the third hay, I wouldn't imagine this causes too many problems. It just looks like a cal third hay, except you've got the Niphal prefix, right? Yeah, I think so. All right, so let's look at the exercises. We're doing A. All right, so again, we've got the yod of the Niphal imperfect prefix, but we can't put a dagesh in R1, so our hirik has to lengthen to a sere. So this is going to be a Niphal imperfect. Yod indicates third masculine, no suffix indicates singular. So Niphal imperfect 3 ms of amen. All right, number 2, we've got our noon hirik prefix. We've got a dalet with a dagesh, but it has a okay. I don't recognize the root here. Without knowing the root, just looking at the form, I would say this is a PL perfect 1CS, but I don't recognize nadach. So let me see if nadach is a root. Sure enough, I don't know if I don't know, man. I really don't remember ever seeing that route before. So maybe I blocked it out. I don't know. But Nadach, that's one that I was lost on. All right, but that's good because even though I could recognize the conjugation well enough to know that this isn't Niphal. This is the form that I would expect to see for a PL perfect. I just didn't recognize Nadach as a root. So that means this is a PL perfect 1CS from Nadach. All right, let me move something here real quick. All right, number 3. We've got Yeva. This is that Vav letter with the dogish again. Yeva Ladu. So this is Yalad. And it is going to be a Niphal, as indicated by the dogish and the kametz. It is a Niphal imperfect, indicated by the yod, and it's 3CP, indicated by the shurik. So Niphal imperfect 3CP from Yalad. Number 4. And when we get to this point where there's so much going on and so much to look at, honestly, like for example, the first thing that sticks out to me is the Yod Hirik. But now that I've covered the Niphal, I can't just assume that Yod Hirik is Cal. Now I could hold in my brain, could be Cal, could be Niphal in the imperfect. But at a certain point with so much to notice, it almost becomes quicker to just look at this and say, what is my root? Like what here makes sense as the root? So anytime I see a segel hey, I'm thinking a third hey verb. Bana, he built, makes perfect sense. So how can I make sense of the rest of this? Well, Bana has a dogish and a kametz in R1. That's a sign of the Niphal in the imperfect. And sure enough, Yod Hirik prefix also goes with the Niphal imperfect. So this is a Niphal imperfect 3ms form of Bana. Here we've got the same root, Bana, but we've got a change in the vowels in the conjugation. So here it's Niv Na. Now, when I see a third hey with a kametz hey, I can assume that I'm in either the perfect or the participle form. Here, I've got the nun hirik prefix. This is a good one. I forgot to check what is the difference between, because you're going to have a kametz either way, in the perfect or in the participle. So how do you? I can't tell you right now off the top of my head whether this is a Niphal perfect 3ms of Bana, or if this is a Cal active participle. No, a Niphal participle, masculine singular of Naval. So let's go look at that again. Third hey participle. Okay. So third hey participle is going to have the segel hey. That's in the masculine singular anyways. That's helpful. All right. So this is the Cal then. Oops. This is the Cal. Cal perfect. No, I'm sorry, not Cal. Niphal perfect 3ms form of Bana. All right. Number 6, we've got Ye Ah. So again, you've got that Sere Kametz pattern at the beginning. Ye Aneh. So my root is Ana. Ana is, I think, answer. Let me double check that. That brought up. Apparently, this is very similar to the Hebrew word ostrich, which is what this actually pulled up. Let me just go to my vocabulary list here. I think Ana is answer. There we go. Answer, or in the Niphal, to be humble or afflicted. That's important to remember, because chances are we're in the Niphal here. So to be afflicted or to be humble. All right. So yeah, Sere Kametz. This is the kametz that I've come to expect of the R1 letter in the Niphal imperfect. I don't have the Dagesh, but I have the lengthened Hirik, and so that tells me that this is a Niphal imperfect 3ms form of Ana. So that would be translated something like he will be afflicted or he will be humbled. Sometimes when you get a word that has such a totally different meaning in a different stem, you kind of have to just file that in your head as more of a homonym than a different meaning. You know, like the animal bear and the verb to bear something. Those are not related semantically. And so those are what are known as homonyms. It's the same name, it's the same spelling, but they mean two different things. And that's my young daughter, who you probably heard walk in, who's very proud of herself for for learning how to use the facilities well. So I wanted to pull up. I can't pull up my lexicon here. Anyways, we won't worry about that. I'm just going to show you that it told me it means ostrich, but that's not important. Anyways, when you've got one meaning like answered and another meaning like be humbled or be afflicted, those are so different that you're going to have a hard time connecting those together. You almost have to learn two different versions of a na, one in the Niphal and one in the cow. So if it seems like how in the world are these related, maybe they're not. I mean, maybe they are. In Hebrew, there's an explanation. I don't know it. So you might just think of this as a homonym. That might help. All right, number 7, we've got Yada, so that one yod vav in the Niphal becomes a vav, a holam vav prefix letter. So we're in the Niphal perfect, and we've got a perfect suffix of nu, which is 1CP. So we've got a Niphal perfect 1CP form of Yada. All right, number 8. And some students have asked about kind of how these patterns affect the meaning. So it's probably good for me to go through here and translate these just to kind of show you how the meaning would affect them. So amen, I'm pretty sure that means to be true. Might mean to be faithful. Amen. It's in the Niphal. Okay, so Niphal, be firm, Hifil, believer, trust. This is the meaning that I have in mind. But in the Niphal, it means be firm. I want to say that probably means be steady, be consistent. I don't think it has just the concrete meaning of like wood or steel or something, but I could be wrong about that. So in that case, the Niphal just brings out this meaning, be firm. So it's not really going to affect your translation a whole lot because you get a specific translation for the Niphal form. So this would just be, he will be firm. Here with Nadach, I think this was scatter. Scatter. So here in the Niphal, again, I don't remember if it was only a Niphal. If this only has meaning in the Niphal, then it would be I scattered. If it has a cow meaning of scatter, then this would be something like I was scattered, which doesn't really make sense because a person doesn't scatter, or get scattered rather. Number 3 with Yalad. So Yalad is to bear or to beget. So this would be they were begotten, or rather they will be begotten with the imperfect. Number 4, Bana is he built, so Yibaneh is going to be he will or it will be built. Number 5, we've got Bana in the perfect with the Niphal, so this is he was or it was built. Ana, again, in the Niphal, it has a unique meaning, which is he answered, but this is in the imperfect. Or no, he, what was it? Not answer, but afflict, be afflicted or be humbled. So this is he will be humbled or he will be afflicted. Number 7, we've got yada again, or I guess not again. Yalad was what we had before. Yada is he knew, and so in the perfect Niphal, this would be I was known. Number 8, we've got yatar. Oh, we haven't done 8 yet. Okay, so yatar is yatar. I get yatar mixed up with, for some reason, I'm thinking like fashion for yatar. Oh, yep, not even close. Remain, leave behind. Whoa. What is a mnemonic for that? Yatar. I mean, I could say I left behind my guitar. Guitar. But that's pretty terrible. So, come up with your own, because it's bound to be better. All right, so yatar here. This is, again, an imperfect family, but we've lost the prefix. So this is either infinitive or imperative. Shurik indicates imperative to MP. So this would be something like, oh, we got to check though, because how do we know that this is Niphal versus Hithil? That's a good question. All right. The Hithil would be He Patach, and then you would just have the. Honestly, I think you'd probably have. You might have like a Hey Sarah Yod or something like that. But the reason why we know this is Niphal is because you've got the Dagesh and the Komets in R1. All right, so if this is imperative to MP, this is going to be something like remain, stay here, something like that. Number 9, we've got Asaf. I want to say Asaf is gather. But didn't we just have another word that meant gather? The reason why I say I don't want to share my mnemonic until I confirm it, because I don't want to give you a bad mnemonic, but I'm pretty sure Asaf means gather, or maybe it means collect. Okay, so let's take a look. Asaf, gather. Okay, so here's my mnemonic for Asaf. It's really stupid, as most of them are, but Asaf, I think of Aesop's fables. It's just a collection of fables, right? He gathered a bunch of fables together. So Asaf is he gathered. All right, so we've got the noon prefix here, and we've got a segel prefix vowel to match the remember, this E class tends to indicate the perfect. It does this in the Hithal as well. So we've got a Niphal perfect, and then the tem suffix confirms that. Niphal perfect 2MP. So that would be you were gathered. So it's both reflexive, past tense, you plural. All right, number 10. All right, hey ra'ot. Okay, anytime I see this whole involved tav in a verb, I'm thinking either a feminine plural participle or an infinitive construct of a third hey. If this is a third hey, I've got ra'ah, which makes perfect sense. The issue is I've got this hey sere here. What does the hey sere indicate? Well, it's going to indicate, since it's infinitive construct, I know that I'm looking at the imperfect family. It's going to indicate, the question is this Niphal or is this Hithil? And basically the answer comes from the Sere Komets pattern here, where we might expect to see the Hirik as part of the imperfect prefix. That gets lengthened to Sere because R1 can't take the Dagesh. But we do still have the Komets here. So this is going to be a Niphal infinitive construct of ra'ah. And since ra'ah is he saw, this would be something like to be seen. Number 11, we have natsal as our root. The noon has assimilated, and it's just a noonheric prefix, so this is just going to be the perfect form. No, it's not. This is the participle, because the difference between the perfect 3ms and the participle masculine singular is this kametz versus a patach. So this is going to be a Niphal participle masculine singular from natsal. Now, what did natsal mean? I don't remember that one. Natsal. That's right. This often, I think this is common in the Psalms. That was part of my mnemonic, which is a dumb one. Don't pay attention because it's probably going to make you think this means psalm, but not Saul. I was thinking Psalter. That's a bad one, though, so don't rely on that. But yeah, I think this appears a lot in the Psalms. Apparently it only occurs apparently its base form is the Niphal. So let's see how that affects the meaning here. Yeah, this is not Niphal. There's no reason to think this is Niphal. So we're going to give this a passive meaning, which is basically being delivered would be the participle form. Or you could just say delivered, I guess, as an adjective. So the delivered groceries, for example, or the delivered victim, someone who was the rescued victim or something like that. That would imply both the passive form and the participial adjectival component. Number 12, again, when I see noon in a bunch of segels, I pretty much immediately go to Niphal perfect. The tav kametz suffix indicates a perfect 2ms form. We've got ana, but that hey has dropped off, and the Serehe here is really throwing me. I'm not sure why we have a Serehe instead of a Sereyod instead of a Hirikyod. Let's go back to that chapter. Yeah, I guess it's the... I guess in the third hey, instead of a Hirikyod connecting value, you get... Well, man, is that right? Of course, we don't get the... Let me check another grammar real quick, see if it gives me a chart. Make sure that's not a typo. Let's see here. Third hey verbs in the Niphal. 2ms. That is a Sereyod. How weird is that? It's just in the Niphal. Oh, nope. And the pool, which you'll learn about, and the Hofal. Okay, so when it's in a passive pattern, for whatever reason, when it's in a passive pattern, these third hays, instead of Hirikyod, go with Sereyod. I just learned that. How about that? All right, so if this is a Niphal perfect 2ms of a na, this would be something like you were humbled or you were afflicted. Number 13, we have Harag. I want to say Harag is like to, it feels aggressive. Um, it's either like pester or it's like afflict or something like that, or I'm way off. I have an aggressive connotation with it. Harag. Oh, hey, yeah, kill. That's pretty aggressive. All right, Harag. Okay, so we've got the Heric Yod suffix, which could be when we get into like object suffixes, could be distracting. It could be you did this to me, but as part of the conjugation, this is a feature of the imperfect family in the feminine singular. And the fact that I don't have an imperfect prefix tells me that this is going to be an imperative. It is a Niphal imperative. The Sere Patak pattern tells you Niphal. Is a Niphal imperative 2FS. So that would be speaking to a woman and shouting at her, kill. So there you go. That's happy. Anything else there? I think that's it. Number 14, we've got Yada once again. Here we've got an imperfect prefix and an imperfect suffix. So this is just a standard Niphal imperfect. Tav prefix with shuric suffix indicates a 2MP form. So this would be something like you will be known. And then number 15, we've got Naba'u. All right, so this is bow. I'm pretty sure. Did he go over the hollows? Probably because it's not that different from the perfect. It's basically just the Niphal prefix on sort of a perfect. Like, I think the perfect here might have, well, in the plural. So basically, this is, I'm parsing this as a Niphal perfect 3CP of bow, which would be something like, that doesn't make sense. Niphal. Why would you have bow in Niphal? This is Nabah. Nabah. Yeah, I totally overlooked the. Whoops. This can't be perfect because you've got, first of all, the Dagish and the Kamets here. A Niphal, a Noon has assimilated. So Nabah, is that? It's not going to be related to Prophet, right? That must be a newer one. It is related to Prophet. How about that? All right, so Nabah is, he prophesied. Well, I guess its standard form is the Niphal. Did it say Niphal and Hifil mean that? Oops. Oh, Hithpael. Okay. All right, so let's see here. It's not going to have a it's not going to be was prophesied because the Niphal in this case is the base form, and so it's not going to have that extra passive idea. So we have here a Niphal what am I missing? Niphal perfect. That's what it is. No, is it? Is it Niphal perfect? Doesn't make sense. Yeah, it is. It's a Niphal perfect. This Kamets here is what's throwing me. The reason why this is a Kamets, I'm expecting this to be a Patak. The reason why it's a kamets is because the aleph is quiescent. It can't close that syllable, and so the patak lengthens to a kamets. This is a really tricky one. But that's what it is. This is Niphal perfect from Naba, where you would expect to see a patak theme vowel in the perfect like this, and actually you would expect this to be a shava. Usually, if this was any other consonant, really. But because the root has an aleph, a third aleph, that's what causes this to open up. So we've got Niphal perfect 3CP form of Nava, which is prophesied. So this would be they prophesied. Alrighty. Let's look at D here. We will do, I guess we'll do number 1. Why not? Oh, that didn't work. All right, number 1, we've got Vayanatslu, Vayanatsalu. So this is Natsal. Natsal was, he delivered. I'm saying a lot, I apologize for that. You know it's Niphal because of the Dagesh Kamets in R1. It's a jussive, vav relative sort of thing. So this is basically, and they delivered the men, the holy ones. Again, for some reason, my electronic version on the Hirik Yods often leaves off the Hirik, but this is HaKadoshim. So they delivered the holy men from Ha-Anashim, Ha-Rashaim, the wicked men. They delivered the holy men from the wicked men. The wicked men, this is a participle here. Nil Chamin. So this is Niphal participle, masculine plural, from Lacham, which is to fight. So the fighting. The men, the fighting, aleichem, against them. So al is usually over or upon, but it also has this, what's the word? Oppositional. I don't know what adjective I'm trying to think of for. It's the opposite of disadvantage, I guess. Yeah. So, anyways, against them. So they rescued the holy men from the wicked men who were fighting against them, and they dwelt or sat in the land, and they dwelt in the good land, and they built Bana, Batim. Is that right? Oh, Batim here is houses. They built houses. And they built Batim Lachem. I want to say they built Bethlehem. But this is plural. They built houses. Oh, Lahem, not Lachem. Okay, so they built houses for them. Okay, Lamed preposition, them suffix. My brains are scrambled. In the, remember, segel, hey segel before a hey comets is the definite article. In the mountains, and in the I do not recognize this word. And in the it's got to be Gimel Yod Aleph. I do not know what that word means. Guys, I really need to review my vocabulary here. Let's see here. Gimel Yod Aleph. When in the world did we have this? My wife is mocking my ignorance.
Not me.
How about that? Oh, well, okay. So it was last week, I guess, but either way. Yeah, that's another word. See, I learned on a different grammar, and so the vocabulary words that they choose are different, but I never learned this word either. There's another word for valley though. I can't remember what it is, but anyways, let's go back here. So they rescued the holy men from the wicked men who were fighting against them, and they dwelt in the good land, and they built houses for them in the mountains or hills and in the valleys. Holy men were delivered. Wait a minute. I thought that not Saul meant deliver in the Niphal. Oh, in the Hiphil, it means deliver. Okay, so the Niphal will have the. And I should have known that because. Where is it at? I should have known that because Ha'anashim does not have et or eight. So it's not a direct object. Ha'anashim is the subject. The holy men were delivered from the wicked men who were fighting against them, and they dwelt in the good land, and they built. Wait, who's building now? Oh, the houses were built. That's right, because it's Niphal, and houses were, and they were built for them. What were built? Houses for them were built in the hills, in the mountains, and in the valleys. Alrighty, well, that's about it. Let me just make sure. Yeah. All right. Any questions or anything? I'm actually thinking about doing a sort of, I don't know, study conference maybe on Monday or something like that for the final exam. Um, I want to give people every opportunity to ask questions and that sort of thing, cover topics that they're having trouble with, but I'm not getting a lot of feedback as far as what people want me to cover. So I may just advertise that. And I know not everybody can make the conference, but we can at least go over, kind of what to expect on the exam. But before we wrap it up here, do you have any topics you want to cover or questions you want to ask? Okay, so let's deal with the meaning, the function of the jussive first, which is basically jussive is a volitional form. So you have you had Greek yet? Okay. So do you remember in maybe it's like in grammar in like maybe third, fourth, fifth grade or something like that, learning about declarative sentences, interrogative sentences, imperative sentences, and exclamatory sentences. Do you remember learning about the
Mhm.
differences? Okay. So declarative sentences, that's basically the perfect and the imperfect. Those are declarative. It's what we call indicative. Those are pretty much the same thing. The indicative mood is basically describing uh, portrayed reality. You don't want to say describing reality because lies are told in the indicative mood. It doesn't necessarily mean that the statement is true, but it's about reality. So I went to the store, he did this, um, basically describing facts, um, stating a fact, anything like that. Um, that is the indicative mood or a declarative sentence. You're declaring something to be the case. You may be wrong, you may be right, but you're stating a fact more or less. Okay. So next to that, we have and questions. When we talk about the interrogative sentences, questions also belong to the indicative mood. So the indicative mood comments or states, describes reality. The um, the imperative mood and let's just call it the volitional mood, because imperative is one section of that. So in the indicative, you're stating facts. In the volitional category, you're now expressing some sort of wish, desire, something like that. Possibility. Um, we often refer to possibility as the subjunctive. So that would be something like, I might go home. You're expressing a possibility. You're not stating a fact. You're not saying, I went home. You're not saying, I will go home. You're saying, I may go home. I might go home. I could go home. I would go home. And it usually involves some sort of contingency. So I would go home if I had a car. Like, that is the contingency required for me to go home. So you're not stating facts, you're stating possibilities. Okay, so that's the subjunctive mood. The volitive or volitional mood is not stating facts, and it's not even stating possibilities and contingencies. It's expressing desire. And so that's where we get the imperative. Imperative, you express your desire for someone else to act. Hand me the phone. That's expressing the will or the volition of the speaker. So that's the voluntative or volitive, or there's a lot of different ways to describe it. Within the volitive, you have first person, second person, and third person. In English, we pretty much only use the second person. Hand me this. Could you pick up some milk at the store or something like that? Any way that we express our desire to someone, it could be a command, it could be a request, please don't slam the door. Any of that is imperative, and it's within the voluntative or volitive mood. The English also has the cohortative, but it's much more rare, and it's something like, let's go to the game. Or it usually starts with let's. So let's order some pizza, let's go to the game, let's read a book, let's pray, something like that. It's basically expressing a request, but it's including yourself within the request. All right, so it's usually plural. Then we have the jussive, which is third person, and this is the rarest of the three in English. And it's usually only expressed, it's archaic, it's usually only expressed in like traditional religious, like prayer language. And it would be something like, may God bless you. Or, we don't even use the jussive anymore. When we want to do something like we wish you a Merry Christmas, we do it declarative. We wish you a Merry Christmas. Like that's stating a fact. We are wishing you a Merry Christmas instead of may you have a Merry Christmas. But you can see how in English, when we use that, may this happen to you. May God be gracious to you. May God lift his face to shine upon you, be gracious to you. May he give you peace. That sort of a thing. Those are all jussives because they're expressing the desire of the speaker not for the addressee. It's not expressing the desire that the addressee do something. It's not expressing a desire that you do something. That would be imperative. If I say bless you, well, actually, bless you is short for God bless you. So God bless you would be jussive in English because you're not talking to God when you say God bless you. You're talking to someone else, but God is that third party that you're wishing a third party would do something. You're expressing a desire for a third party to do something. That's what the jussive is. So the only difference really between, practically maybe, between imperative, cohortative, and jussive is whether it's second person, first person, or third person. They're all doing the same type of thing. They're just doing it with respect to different people. So again, think of the jussive as an imperative. It's just a more indirect imperative. Instead of talking to God and saying, God, heal this woman, you're now talking to the woman and saying, may God heal you. That's the jussive, essentially. It's a third person volative. It's a third person expression of wish or desire. So that's the function of the third person, or the function of the jussive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so how you recognize the form. It's tricky because often the jussive looks identical to a imperfect. It often looks exactly the same. In fact, there's only 3 or 4 situations where it's going to look different. One situation where it might look different is when you've got a third hey verb. When you have a third hey verb in the jussive, it's going to be a shortened form. So let's look at an example with bana. Let's go to jussive. Where are we at? Volatives. Okay, so jussive. Let's look at the imperfect yivneh, which is he will build. Where would it be? Oh, imperative, jussive. Wow, he doesn't really. I mean, this is all. Okay, I guess he's only dealing with galah, bakah, and Allah. So let's deal with bakah, cry. Okay, so yivkeh over here, yivkeh would be she will cry, or sorry, he will cry. Yivkeh, because this is a masculine form. Yivkeh, she will cry. If I want to express this as a command, cry, and a direct command, I'm actually talking to the person that I want to cry, then I would use an imperative, second person imperative, and that would be something like, I guess it'd be bakot. It would be the Holam Vav Tav ending on, so basically, Beit, Shavah, Kof, Holam Vav Tav. Bakot, that would be cry. But if I wanted to make it a little bit more indirect, I wanted to use the jussive, then I would say, let him cry, rather than cry. So, in order to do that, what happens is it's very important that you notice the difference here between the imperfect form, yivkeh, and the jussive form, yevk. right? It's hard to say even, but Yefk. What's happened is the Segel Hey has dropped off. And as a result, emphasis gets kind of pulled toward the front, Yefk. And so that's why we have to kind of lengthen this syllable here. But the idea is it's shortened. The Segel Hey has dropped off altogether. It's shortened. When the jussive looks different from the imperfect, it's because the jussive is a shortened form. So this happens in third Hey verbs, like this. The third Hey gets dropped off. This happens in Niphal verbs, Niphal pattern. So just in the Niphal pattern, this could be strong verbs or weak verbs. The Niphal form of a jussive is going to look shorter than the Niphal form of an imperfect. And the shortening there takes place not in the dropping of a third Hey, because not all Niphals have third Heys. The Niphal form is shortened by taking that Hirik Yod infix that signifies the Niphal and shortening it to a sere. So you go from Hirik Yod to sere. That's the difference between the jussive and the imperfect in the Niphal. So let me pull up the Niphal here. We'll look at imperfect versus jussive. All right. So Yaktil is the Niphal imperfect form of Katal, 3ms. But this Hirik Yod gets shortened to a sere in the jussive form. So Yaktil becomes Yaktail. Now this shortening of the Hirik Yod to the sere, obviously this Hirik Yod occurs in the Niphal, so this shortening from Hirik Yod to sere is only going to occur in the Niphal. But that's a second time, that's a second place where there's going to be shortening of a shortening of an imperfect form to form the jussive. Aside from these two times, they'll look identical. So if you've got a Niphal that's not a third Hey, the jussive and the imperfect are going to look identical. The third, except for there's a third time where it gets shortened. So hollow verbs. As in third Hey verbs, the jussive is a shortened form of the imperfect for hollow verbs. So where we would have yakum in the imperfect, this shurik is going to shorten to a holum in the jussive. So where we would have yasim in the imperfect for seem, that's going to shorten to yasame in the jussive. So far we've seen three situations. These are the only three times that a jussive is going to look different than an imperfect. So this is the only time you're going to be able to recognize a jussive form, is either it's a third Hey, in which case it's going to be a shortened form of the imperfect. It'll lose the third Hey letter. Or it happens to be a Niphal pattern verb, in which case the expected Hirik Yod is going to be a sere. That's when you'll recognize a jussive, because you'll be expecting to see a Hirik Yod in this Niphal, and it'll be a sere instead. And then the third time is you expect to see yasim, but you only see yasame. Well, then that's a jussive, because it's a shortened form of this hollow verb. So third Hey verbs, Niphal verbs, and hollow verbs are three situations where you're going to notice a difference between the jussive and the imperfect. All other times, the jussive and the imperfect are going to look identical. These are the only times you'll be able to tell them apart. Which means, if you see an imperfect, it's worth asking, should I read this as an imperfect or should I read this as a jussive? It's always good to have that option in your head because they look identical. Or I should say, if they're supposed to look identical, then it could be either one. So does context make more sense if I interpret this as a jussive? Let him build rather than he will build? Does it make more sense to translate it as a jussive, or does it make more sense to translate it as an imperfect? That would be the question that you have to ask. But In these three situations, a third hey verb, a Hiphil verb, or a hollow verb, in those three situations, there will be a difference between what the jussive looks like and what the imperfect looks like. Now, I said 3 or 4 situations. The other thing to be aware of when it comes to the jussive is when you have a vav relative, the vav relative attaches either to the perfect, in which case you can't really tell the difference between a vav relative perfect and a conjunction vav perfect. They look the same. Or the vav relative will attach to, we tend to say the imperfect. It's actually not attaching to the imperfect form, it's attaching to the jussive form. It's just that the jussive so frequently looks identical to the imperfect that we end up saying imperfect. But when you see a vav relative attached to a third hey verb, it's gonna look like a jussive. When you see a vav relative attached to a Hiphil verb, it's gonna look like a jussive. And when you see a vav relative attached to a hollow verb, it's not gonna look like an imperfect. It's gonna look like a jussive. And so sometimes we'll throw the fourth category of vav relative in there, but it's not actually a new category because those words only look jussive as opposed to imperfect when they're third hey, Hiphil, or hollow. So that's how you would recognize one. You're often not going to be able to distinguish it from the imperfect, but if it's a third hey, you could. If it's a hollow, you could. Or if it's a Hiphil, you could distinguish it. I have a feeling that doesn't completely answer the question. And really, the best way to sort of cultivate this way of distinguishing them is honestly just through maybe like a curated parsing chart that actually lists jussives and imperfects and perfects next to each other, where you have to kind of be able to tell the difference between them. That's just sort of a muscle that has to develop over time, that recognition. And once you have that recognition, all of a sudden the explanation starts to make more sense as well. So it's the kind of thing where you can explain it, but until you like practice the difference, it's still going to be a little bit foggy, I think.
No, I think that helps because I think I was struggling for some
Right.
reason. So it can't be just the same.
Yeah, anytime you see an imperfect verb and it is not a third hey, it is not Hiphil, and it is not hollow, that could be a jussive. It just depends on context. So that's the thing you have to remember is most of the time jussive and imperfect look identical. It's just context will tell you whether one meaning is in mind or the other. But I had a lot of trouble digesting the jussive when I was learning too. It's a foreign concept because it's not something we talk about in English anyways. And then to just try to incorporate this brand new concept with a language that you're still trying to master, I mean, it's a confusing thing. So it does honestly take time and practice.
So
Yeah, that's actually an excellent. That's an excellent example. You're right. It's in Greek instead of Hebrew, but that's okay because it's actually going to illustrate our point for us. Let me pull. Oops. That's Mark 8:34, I believe. Okay, so if anyone would come after me, let him deny. Right. Okay, so if I hover over, if you look down here at the very bottom, can you see my mouse? Okay, sure, of course. Let me try it this way. I'm gonna open up my interlinear. Um, all right, let me maximize the window here. Oops. Okay, so I still don't have enough info. All right. So if anyone would come after me, let him deny, right? Okay, so this right here is going to parse deny for us. So if I hover, you know, I guess I'll just have to tell you what all of the letters mean here because I thought it would pop up on a hover, but oh, I know what I got to do. Let me just do power lookup real quick. Where's that at? Oh, and bring it up here and bring it over here. All right. Well, yeah. All right. So V means verb. Um, A is basically the word for past tense in Greek. It's aorist. Um, M is middle. It has to do with whether it's active or passive. And then the M here is imperative. And you'll see a 3S. Well, that means the same thing in Greek as it does in Hebrew. This is third person singular. So this is a third person singular imperative. Well, Hebrew doesn't have third person imperatives. That's what the jussive is. Okay, so a third person imperative in Greek is exactly the same as it's probably oversimplifying, but it's basically the same as a jussive in Hebrew. So when he says let him deny himself, he's not saying give him permission to deny himself, because that's the problem in English is we use let and may as permission and as desire. It's not the same thing. Jesus isn't speaking to his disciples and saying, allow him to take up his cross. Don't prevent him from taking up his cross. Don't hinder him from taking up his cross. This is an actual command. Now, I should say it's an actual imperative. Now, imperatives are also used to express request or just a wish or something like that. So I don't want to be too strong here. But this isn't about permission. This is a command to anyone who would come after me. So Jesus could easily just say, if you would come after me, if you would follow me, if you want to follow me, deny yourself and take up your cross. But he's not saying if you want to come after me. He's saying if anyone, third person, would want to come after me, he must. And a lot of translations, for example, I'll bet the NIV probably has he must deny himself. Oh, 34. Nope, 34. Must, yeah. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny. So again, this is what the imperative does. Same thing with the jussive. So this is a perfect example to think of when you're trying to now again, this is the more command oriented side of the jussive. There's also a request oriented side of the jussive, which is like in prayers, like may God heal you. You're not ordering God to do something, but you're expressing that desire. So within the form of jussive, just like within the form of the imperative, there's a spectrum of from polite request to stern command, stern order. There's a spectrum there that you have to kind of recognize in context. But I think that's a good way to kind of bring out what the jussive does in Hebrew by looking at an English and Greek example.
Cool. That's
So yeah,
helpful.
that's a great one to bring up. I'll probably use that to illustrate it in the future. Anything else?
No, the only other thing.
Yeah.
So like
Mm-hmm. Right. It
do we
is.
still?
It is different than it would be outside of coronavirus, and it's not different from like last semester in the sense that
Okay.
because so many people are still under these orders, someone in your family can do this. Like
Okay.
I do need some sort of proctor report, someone vouching for you that one, they watched you, they were present for the entire exam. Two, you took the entire exam in one sitting. You didn't get up and go somewhere in the middle of it. And then
Mhm.
three, you didn't use any resources except for you are allowed to use the lexicon. That you're
Okay.
allowed to do. But you really ought to use the concise lexicon that's the other required textbook rather than your
Right.
the lexicon in your book because it's just so easy to go to the grammar
Right.
section. Now, honestly, I obviously I'm not watching this. Um, a lot of people probably I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I'm sure there are some people who don't bother to buy the lexicon. They just use the book. Like it's just on honor pretty much. I mean, you can
Mhm.
there's a lot of ways that you can cheat on this. We're basically saying, there's only so much we can do. Have someone there to vouch for you.
Sure.
If you use the lexicon in the grammar book, I'm fine with that, but you're not supposed to use the grammar section. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Makes
Okay.
sense. I think that's the
All right. Do you have your online connect set up and everything?
I do. I
Good.
mean,
Yep.
that's
Yeah, I gotta.
oh,
Go ahead.
the other thing that I actually, but it looked like
Yeah, that was brought to my attention a while ago. That's something that
okay.
I probably have to fix in calculating the grade. I don't think I can actually change that, so that's something I have to
Okay.
report. But my fear is if someone tries to fix that now, it might just
Yeah.
wipe out everybody's grades. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I did know about that. Thanks for bringing that up, and I'll probably put that in an announcement that hey, I'm going to make sure that this is taken care of the correct way. But
Okay.
yeah, that's something. Again, I think that when they condense this class into 15 weeks instead of 16 weeks, I think that screwed up a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. It seems like we never used
Yeah.
must have
And it
just pushing
really it
stuff.
really messed up with the assignment of the peer reviews. Like that threw
Yeah.
everything off. So I'll let them know about it though.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you.
All right. Well, if you need anything, let me know. Otherwise, like I said, I'll probably plan on doing another one Monday. I know a lot of people probably can't make it, but if
Yeah.
you're able to, and if not, send me any questions you have, and I'll go over them.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Have a good weekend.